Welcome to the Gigs Podcast. I'm your host, Nikki Sanz, founder and CEO of Gigs, the professional career platform for the live event industry. On this podcast, we are interviewing the very best in the touring and live event industry to hear the good, the bad, the ugly, and the unreal moments of life gigging and lessons learned on the road. When the lights go down, the lasers come up, and the pyro explodes, who makes sure it's unforgettable? Show Live SFX, your ultimate partner in spectacular effects. Founded by industry pros Cole Bibler and Hayden Hale, with over 15 years of live production and touring experience working with legends like Taylor Swift, Paul McCartney, and Beyonce, Show Live SFX specializes in jaw-dropping effects, lasers, pyro, fire, and custom designs. They've ignited the stages of legendary acts like Styx, Foreigner, Nitro Circus, Karen Leon, and dazzled audiences at top corporate events. Elevate your show to a whole new level. Whether it's a massive tour or an exclusive corporate gala, trust Show Live SFX to deliver exceptional brilliance and safety. Visit showlivesfx.com today and ignite your lifestyle. Today, I'm excited to welcome Chris Thacker, an industry veteran who started his career as a guitar tech on tour with Butch Walker back in 2010. Since then, Chris has worn many hats on the road, from backline tech to set carp, playback tech, and stage manager. Now he's the tour manager for country artist Dierks Bentley. In addition to his work on the road, Chris recently co-founded StageWater, a canned water brand that gives back to entertainment workers in need. Chris, welcome to the Gigs Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited you're here. We have so much to get into, but I want to start with your very first gig as guitar tech with Butch Walker. First of all, what is guitar tech? And how did you get that gig?
So guitar tech is maintaining the quality and integrity of all the instruments and the amps for the artist. So with Butch, I had acoustic guitars, electric guitars, mandolins, and this kind of mandolin banjo hybrid. I don't really know the name of it, but I was kind of throwing all those things. And, you know, you're doing string changes. You're making sure that, like, the instruments are intonated. You're making sure, like,
what does that mean?
Intonated is like when you play an open note on a guitar string, and then you play it on 12, that they're both in tune. And that has to do with, like, your bridge placement, the relief of your neck. So there's a lot of little kind of technical things that nobody really thinks about unless you're the guy that's actually playing the guitar, and you know, play a G chord down here, and then you play a high note and it's out of key. So your guitar tech is kind of responsible to make sure you sound, that there's continuity of sound across the whole instrument. And then your amps, your pedal boards, that all that stuff works and is, you know, functioning night over night. So yeah, I did that with Butch, and it was kind of a whirlwind.
I can imagine you were a musician yourself before getting that.
Yeah, that helped a lot.
Yeah, guitar specifically?
Guitar player,
okay.
Yeah. So in 2010, prior to, I'd always played around Athens and different places in Georgia. My brother was the guitar player in Butch's band, and I was a civil engineer at a firm. I went to Georgia Tech and decided, like, okay, playing in bars, you know, I'm gonna lean into a career. And I kind of always wanted to be a civil engineer as a kid, before I found music. Housing crisis, recession, 2008, 9, 10, the top of 2010, I was laid off from my job as a civil engineer. My brother and I, it was right around New Year's. He had been out and done Lollapalooza with Butch and a bunch of things, and came back. And I lived in the country, like up in northeast Georgia, near a town called Helen. And we were kind of sitting out around a fire, and I was licking my wounds, and we were drinking beers. And he was like, "Man, I think Butch needs a guitar tech. You know, you should come down and meet the tour manager." They were playing in Atlanta at a place called Seven Stages. So I went down there to see that show with him, and the tour manager at the time, a guy named Tom Addison. My brother introduced me to Tom, and we're backstage, and I overheard Tom saying that, like, "Oh man, I need a silver Sharpie." We were walking out to go get dinner, and on the way back from dinner, I was like, "I'm gonna stop and buy this dude some Sharpies," since he's like scrambling. He's really the only guy there. There's not a tech at this moment. Tom's also mixing front of house and handling all these guests because it was a hometown show for Butch. So I showed back up with a silver pack of Sharpies, and he was like, "Damn, okay." Like,
wow.
good looking out, you know? So it kind of came up again. Butch was going to go out and do a main support slot for Train, right when Train's Hey Soul Sister album started blowing up. And so we were doing a theater run. It was like 2,500 cap rooms, 4,000 cap rooms. And Thomas O'Keefe was the tour manager at the time. And so, you know, Butch needed a tech, and my brother kind of kept pushing me on Tom, and Tom was like, all right, you know, I'll give this dude a shot. So I showed up with no work box, no real, you know, tools that I'd used changing my own guitar strings and bars, you know, for years and years, but no real, you know, understanding that like everything I did to prepare myself for a little bar gig was actually kind of the whole gig. You know, you just don't get to walk out there and play the show. So that kind of attention to detail, it paid off, I guess.
And problem solving.
And, you know, now the world we live in, or I live in with Dierks, it's a lot of fractals and a lot of, you know, kind of bulletproof technology to a certain point. And with Butch, it's analog amps, big pedal boards with lots of connections in between that like to fail at showtime. And so it was, you know, there was a lot of troubleshooting and a lot of learning on the fly, but all stuff, again, that I'd done for myself and for, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I jump on this tour bus. We go, you know, my brother convinces Tom to hire me. We do a couple days of rehearsals at a place called Avatar in Atlanta, where Butch always rehearsed before the Train tour. And I think the other thing that solidified my position is, you know, we're in the middle of rehearsals. It's like day 2. I'm still kind of like, where am I? What am I doing? And Butch has his computer on a mic or a music stand with a humongous Starbucks sitting right beside it, like a venti coffee. And I'm like, from me to the light behind you across the room. And I see this computer stand start sliding backwards. Gosh. And so I like take 3 big leaps across the room right as it starts to slide off, and like grab the computer, and the coffee falls and blows up everywhere. And like, Butch is a producer, and so he's always making records. He's always working on records with people.
It's some of the biggest records ever.
He had all these records apparently on this computer. And I handed him the computer, and he's wide-eyed and was just like, holy shit, like that would have been disastrous had the coffee blew up the computer, you know? And so like from that moment on, he and I had this kind of inherent trust, and it was...
You saved someone's life.
It was off to the races from there. And so, yeah, we did 6 months that year. We did the 5 or 6 weeks opening for Train. And then we did another lap around the country with Butch doing headlining shows at clubs and small theaters. And then we ended in Atlanta, which was a hometown show for him. And then the next day we flew to Europe and ended up doing 2 months opening for Pink in stadiums. And it's like,
gee,
all of a sudden you're...
Did you miss civil engineering?
I did not, and I still do not. I dabble in it some, and I have some friends that I shared offices with who are now owners of their, you know, one guy in particular owns a company where we grew up, and he's doing great with it. And occasionally he'll let me come in and design a water system and, you know, do some of that stuff. Just I have this long-term goal of getting my license just to fulfill that personal checklist, but I'm doing a very poor job of it.
Well, I think you're living a different dream.
It's a different dream, yeah. It's two very spectacularally different worlds.
Exactly. And so then you start as guitar tech. You're doing a Europe tour with the largest artist at the time, truly.
It was insane, yeah.
Then you get into what job next?
So we did that for 2010, and then 2011... I got married, so I did all of that stuff with Butch. We come home from Europe. We were supposed to be in Europe for 1 month. Pink asked if we would stay for the second month because he and her are close friends, and it was going great. And she had worked him into the show, and so it was like, well, just stick around instead of having 3 acts on the bill. We'll just have 4 now and start early. So we did that. Came home for a couple weeks and went back over to Europe and was guitar taking for Courtney Love. And we did a swing of festivals. So that summer I got 19 countries under my belt.
This is all preparing for a wedding.
All while my wife is, yes.
Yeah,
I mean, got a couple people to play some music, and she handled everything else. So get back from the tour, with Courtney over there in Hole, or some semblance of Hole. I don't know if they were calling it Hole at the time, but and then got married, and so my wife and I moved into our place shortly thereafter together, and so 2011 I didn't do much, and Thomas reached out about me jumping on to be a backline tech for Jerry, who's a member of Train Now. Then he was like the auxiliary keys, acoustic guitar, vocal, and I declined, which that's really the only gig that I've ever kind of just flat out said I can't swing it. And they were going on 12 months. It was like a world tour, They were like,
is that why you said no?
Yeah, kind of being newly married, and I wanted to be able to spend time with my wife and settle into our house, and and I could, everything would have been totally different had I said yes, but all roads lead to here, kind of thing.
Well, priorities, so, and now you have family, and now you have to prioritize different things. And were you worried that could be, because I think a lot of people are worried that if they don't take that gig to take something else or to prioritize family, it might shut a lot more doors.
I was really scared when I said no because, and I mean, in all fairness, I didn't have a network at that point. I'd had the handful of people that I toured with Butch, and kind of had met a couple other people, but I didn't have a network. And I'm from Georgia. I wasn't from Nashville or LA or New York, so it wasn't a super common career path for those cities. Right. So, or for my city. And I mean, I kind of, it scared me at the time, and I didn't really do much in 2011. So I went back to, I still didn't really have a job because nobody was building anything or designing anything. Gosh. So like, I'm back to driving nails and, laying rock. My father was a stonemason, and my father-in-law is a carpenter. So I piecemealed work together with that, and then did, would play in bars on the weekends and just kept it floating. And then in 2011, we did another month and a half with Butch. He put out a new record, and my brother was also still in the band at that time. And so we, it was fun. We did another trope around America, and after that, it kind of, I started working again after that. And then I tour managed an Americana band called Shovels and Rope.
When did you catch the bug? Was it that first tour?
The first time that I walked into the rehearsal space and was like, there's a tour bus sitting outside, and it's like, that's all I ever want. All I ever wanted growing up was to see the world through music. That was my mantra. So like, even when I was learning to play instruments, it wasn't like, I want to be on stage or I want to be the person in the spotlight. My mantra growing up was, I want to see the world through music. And I mean, be careful what you wish for.
Hello. Trip around.
Yeah. So like, I got that. And so I feel like the moment I walked in there, it was like, I didn't ever really have this like want. I mean, anybody that's a musician always wants to play music, but there was never like this woe is me or this envy for the role. It's like, I'm here, we're doing this. This is spectacular, And my brother's out there crushing it, and it's like, walk off stage, high five your bro, have some Jameson on the bus, go run around London or Prague or wherever you are. And it's just like, it was amazing.
Living the dream.
It was the summer. That summer was the dream.
Wow.
I've probably been chasing that ever since.
Wow.
Like 2 paid months in Europe with, your best friend who's your family. And it's like, it was spectacular. So
incredible.
Yeah.
So then you go back out, you're still guitar teching?
Go back out. I'm tour managing Shovels and Rope, and this is like the beginning of 2012, or summer 2012. And Shovels and Rope, they're a husband and wife duo, Carrie Ann and Michael, and their dog, who R.I.P. Towns, just passed away not too long ago.
No.
But it was the 4 of us in an RV.
Whoa.
And we drove around the country for 5 months, and they had never had anybody help them on the road, and I'd never tour managed or done anything except backline tech and play a little bit in bars. So it's like, all of a sudden I'm selling merch and icing buses and making day sheets and, not mixing front of house, but when something's really wonky, going and saying like, hey, this is off, this is kind of the way they want to be presented. So you're trying to cover all the bases And these are small venues, like 200 to 300 cap rooms. So there would be an occasional 500 or 600 cap room in there. But
you were going from a tour bus opening for Pink in Europe to driving a van and selling merch. What did that do to your psyche?
It didn't do anything negative. It was, I saw it as an opportunity to grow, because I ultimately thought, well, if I'm going to be in this side of the industry, I would like to be a production manager or a tour manager. Like I loved being a guitar tech, but I've always kind of wanted to have the opportunity to be in a leadership position and affect change and like create culture. And I was able to do that with them on a small scale. Like, they had never seen a day sheet, and all of their settlements have been like not really these, properly documented. It was, it's bars and small clubs. So, and those are the hardest things to settle in the world. I mean, you get in there when you're dealing with a promoter, and it's like, I know Live Nation's money's good. I know AEG's money's good. The dude who owns the honky tonk in Greenville, like, he wants to argue with you on every nickel and dime, because everybody's fighting for every dollar. So
how do you handle that? If you could get into that a little bit.
You just you got to toe a line.
Okay.
I mean, and for me, it boils down to like what's moral and ethical. And like, I know that's a very subjective thing to say, but like, if a venue is contractually supposed to provide spotlights, and they agree to it in the rider, I'm making this example up, so maybe this is good, but they agree to it in the rider, but they only have 4 in house, and then they rent 2 to fulfill the rider, and then they try to expense you on the back end. Like, I'm not going to pay that expense because you agreed to that without line iteming the expense in the deal memo, and it's like, that's kind of, and it's not always that cut and dry, obviously, but it's like those little things. We create deals and we create deal memos and expenses in the deal memos for the reason of having the conversation about the expense prior to settlement. So you knew you only had 4 spotlights in your venue. You knew we needed 6. If you knew you had to rent 2, it's as simple as putting a line item in the deal memo that says, if you want 6, it's going to cost you X amount of dollars, and then I'll happily pay it. You know what I mean? But like, that comes out of the big picture and the overage, and if you're in points and yada yada yada.
Well, you got to know your stuff. I mean, you got to know when you're going in. And what time of the show are you settling?
I mean, we typically settle. You try to do a pre-settlement before the show.
Got it.
And like, it's always easier, obviously, if the show's sold out, because then you don't have to adjust ticketing after your box office closes. Right. So yeah, you like a pre-settlement, you like a sold-out show, obviously. I mean, who doesn't like a sold-out show? But
true.
You get in there, and like, so I typically try to build my settlement around the pre-settlement, hopefully the day before if they're on top of their game, and then go through and adjust during the show or right before the show. And with Dierks, we're all a very hands-on crew, so like, I have a couple show cues that I still participate in, which is kind of atypical, like listening to Marco, who's in the office and doesn't really go out there. But that's just kind of how his organization was built. Like, the TM before me did show cues. The production manager before me did all of Dierks's guitar changes, Whoa. So it's like everybody is kind of there for that moment, which I think is interesting, because that's kind of why we're all there. And like, it's a different thing, and it makes my life a little more difficult if there is kind of a hard settlement. I don't get to dig into it until song 5 or 6, because the first couple songs are when I'm out there helping.
What are some of the cues?
We bring like a person up on stage every night to chug a beer, and so like, I help get them out of the audience. Our security guy is in the barricade between the stage and the pit, and they'll kind of usher them up to a ladder, and I'll walk them over from one side of the stage to Dierks, and then bring them back off stage, And it's
how do you pick this person?
Dierks picks them. It's
really?
Random.
It's random?
Night. Yeah.
Do you pat them down before?
I mean, in theory, they've been patted down before they got in the venue.
Good point.
If house security is doing their job, everyone is safe. And like, it's been a show shtick of his for the 11 years I've worked with him. So people that come to Dierks' shows know that like, if they're in the pit, if they bring a big old sign, there's a chance that they're going to get to come on stage, And it's fun.
That's cool that you get to be a part of that, because I think tour managers are usually, I mean, the show is when they get to finally breathe, or sometimes I feel like tour managers can also feel so disconnected to the artist in the show and the reason they're doing it in the first place, in that stuffy back closet of an office that they have.
Yeah.
So that's cool that you're a part of the show.
I love that part, and I don't ever want to see that go away for me personally. And even if it did go away, I would still go hang out on stage left for the first handful of songs, no matter who. I hope to work for Dierks for years and years, but I have tour managed other artists in our off time. Like I filled in with a guy named Luke Grimes last year, who is a great guy. But my natural position when the show starts is I go sit stage left for the first 3 to 5 songs and make sure that like everything's working, especially in, the stuff with Luke, we were in 1,000 cap rooms or whatever. And like you have limited crew. And so maybe your monitor guy's buried and your techs are teching and everybody's kind of eyes down. And it's like, it helps to be an extra just set of eyes. So if something goes wonky, not even with the primary, but say one of the band guys is having a pack drop out and then the primary is also having a problem. So your monitor guy who doesn't have a tech on a club tour is scrambling to make sure your primary's good, all the while maybe your guitar player or aux player's dying over there. It's like, at least I can give them an assurance, like, you're seen. As soon as we resolve the issue here, we're moving to you next. I'll make sure the monitor engineer knows. And it's like, so you create just an opportunity to succeed where if there wasn't another set of eyes out there, maybe it would not go so smoothly. That's my hope, at least.
Yeah.
I might just be lingering in the way. But
you're just trying to chug a beer. You're trying to get up on stage.
I like to feel like I'm contributing in some capacity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You have just an incredible energy, a calm, peaceful energy, just who you are.
I appreciate that.
And have you always had that, or is that something that you think you've gotten through time? Because you mentioned, being there, if someone sees you, they know that everything's fine.
Yeah.
Having that, that's got to be stressful.
I think it is stressful, and I mean it might be a thing that I developed on the road, but I don't think it is. I mean, I think I've kind of have always been like when you're younger with your friends, like the peacekeeper or the person who listens and wants to be there and be helpful. So
yeah,
maybe I didn't really find a good, that skill isn't very applicable in engineering. So maybe that expressed itself more once I got on the road and realized that like in moments of chaos, people are looking for peace and they're looking for confidence and they're looking to know that like everything's going haywire around me and I'm standing in front of 100 people or 50,000 people. And when they're looking around, it's like they want to know that somebody sees them and that it's going to be okay. And so if you can stand there and just be like, I got you, it helps. And I it helps more too in clubs. I feel like, obviously, like when you're at the level we are with Dierks, there's eyes everywhere.
Yes.
People, like every person has a paid person to help them and make sure they're comfortable and confident. And, they know where to go when something goes wrong. But in clubs or when you're a main supporter and opening act, it's like, you don't have the staff for that. You know what I mean?
Right. So, and you are everything.
So,
which actually brings me to the next question. So you went from backline to TMing, but you've also been a set carp, playback tech, stage manager. I would love for you to go into detail about each of those roles, about, starting with carp, what does a set carpenter do?
So that was my first job with Dierks, was a set carp. So I went from this tour managing shovels and rope in these little bitty clubs to, again, Tom Addison calling me and saying, hey man, we need a set carpenter for Dierks. Like, and I was like, man, whatever it takes, like I'll jump in and do it, So yeah, I mean, as a set carp your day, you're responsible for building the set that is in place, whether that be a handful of risers or a big, elaborate structure like you see on the Taylor Swifts of the world. And there's a whole bunch of them on those and the Morgan Wallens. And so yeah, any soft goods, I mean, on Dierks' tour, I would hang a kabuki, and then we would do, if there was
What's that?
Okay, so a kabuki is a curtain that might, say your main support act finishes, you drop a curtain, it kind of unfurrows at the front of the stage, and it masks your changeover. And then everybody's, doing this change, the moving the main support act off, positioning the headliner for their show. And then at the top of show, usually there's some kind of big dramatic dropping of the curtain, right?
Yes.
Which is always fun and problematic when you're doing outdoor amphitheaters.
Oh, yeah.
It works spectacularly in an arena,
Yes.
and it works spectacularly 85% of the time in amphitheaters.
Good weather?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, when you're in some of those places, it's like we've done kabukis. I mean, we've cut it, obviously, too, if it's unsafe. Like,
Right.
But there's sometimes when the wind's blowing just enough and you're like, oh, God, I really hope, like, there's one big gust. It's just going to cover all the big gusts.
Oh,
and
my
it's going to be a total Spinal Tap moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And luckily we've avoided those, but that's what's going through your head when you're in some of those places. Helping opening acts, if, we used to do like a mid-stage truss and we would hang big backdrops for the opening acts and kind of hide our set and hide our video wall.
Gotcha.
What else? Carpet or mylar on the floor, building the thrust. We had a B stage that was out at front of house that we would construct for like a little moment where Dierks would go into the audience.
Wow.
And we've had some pretty wild set designs over the years. Our designer is a guy named Bruce Rogers who does the Super Bowls and has since Prince or before. I don't know if Prince was his first one, but Bruce he's a creative genius, but it definitely can get elaborate, You have to there's some technical aspects to it, and all the while you're thinking about safety because all of the performers are on your structure, so you're double checking that everything's tight and right and 100% all the time. So
have you ever been a part of a festival or some set, some stage that malfunctioned?
I have not, knock on wood.
Good.
Yeah. No, we've had the extent of my troubles have been running into places that have like really soft, like if you're advancing a house stage, like we don't really carry our own stage into an arena setting. And so they're providing all the decks, and you kind of just got to go through and be careful that all of those still have their integrity. And like Dierks' show typically has a lift or two in it, which are, very, very heavy. So when you're bringing those onto arena stages, it's like you have to, you're just double checking and making sure that like where you're putting heavy stuff will hold heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Which sounds simple, but when you have to think about like an 8x8 lift, you can't put it in the middle of an 8x8 arena deck because it's going to put all the weight in the middle. So you have to split the decks and, it's not hard stuff, but if you don't do it, then you set up for bad things to happen.
So as last question about carp, and we'll move on, but are you working with the automation team to manage those lifts?
We've typically had our team run them.
Got it.
Run the lifts, which is atypical. It typically would fall under automation. And this year, for instance, we have lifts and an automation team who's, our show this year has a big moving video wall. But our set carpenter, our lead carp, does all the lift moves.
Got it.
So
very cool.
Yeah.
So then you get into what's playback tech?
All of the stuff that the band hears in their ears.
Got it.
So click tracks, cues, like, verse 2, 3, 4, and everybody starts on the verse. And then like also any auxiliary tracks that are playing that front of house is using to kind of fatten up the mix, or like, there's plenty of times where we don't use a ton of those things with Dierks, and like a lot of times, a lot of newer artists have their whole shows built on a playback rig. So you time code everything. All of your lighting is to time code. Your video cues are to time code. Sometimes your pyro cues, your pedal boards change via time code, and like,
wow.
Ours is pretty simple. We're running tracks that the band guys hear in their ears, the click track, the vocal cue, the vocal counts, and then we got a couple acoustic guitars, some keys and pads and strings, and a couple loops, just to fatten up drum beats or like breakdown sections. But I remember the first time that I saw like a real playback rig, we did this kind of one-off NFL thing with One Republic, and I think this was post Marco, but Zito was still there, and they have this spaceship set up backstage, and it controlled everything. Like drum pad sounds changed, guitar patches changed, like everything was running from the rig. So
wow.
It's like that guy's
that's his her responsibility.
Yeah. Like if mine screws up, we just kind of like solo the click, or like we can take it out and the band guys can still play. You know what I mean? But when like it's running that level of stuff, and with time code, I mean, if it's running your lighting show to a degree and your video cues, like it's an intense job. And you're working closely, like during that time I worked closely with the musical director. So like if the band gets off cue, I would reset the cue for them. And like we built our playback rig in a way that allowed him to have control via MIDI from his pedal board, so he can flip to a different screen and he can reset. Like if Dierks gets off or keeps talking longer and we've run into a different section of the song, he can bounce it back, or I could bounce it back. And
cool. Goodness gracious.
So that,
then are you doing this at the same time as
I was the set carpenter my first year, and then quickly became the set carpenter and the bass tech. And so I did that role for a couple years, 2 years, I think, on Dierks. And then became the stage manager, and then acquired the playback with the stage manager. So for five years I was stage manager, I think. 5 or 6 years I was stage manager. 4 of those I was the stage manager and the playback tech.
Can you please tell me the difference between stage manager and production manager? And I'm sorry for all this, just for any early listeners.
It's so, I mean, the way that I always broke it up is like the production manager is responsible for the overall picture of the production, for the advance, for making sure that all of the tools are prepared and necessary. It's the stage manager's job to execute all of that on the day of the show. That's how I always envision it. And I mean, stage or production managers will come out there obviously and help, and like it's kind of traditional at the top of loadout. If you're not a tour that's big enough to have a proper dock master, your production manager will come out and dock master the first truck or two.
Gotcha.
Kind of help your stage manager get off to the races, and then the stage manager takes over for the out. But your stage manager is the one who's running all of your labor, making sure that all of your departments have the humans in place that they need when they need them. The production manager advances those people and makes sure that they show up for their gig.
Yeah.
But once they're on site, they're kind of under the stage manager's tutelage. I mean,
helpful.
if a production manager does their job correctly, the stage manager should have a good day.
That's so cool to hear.
Yeah.
And then when did you take on the leadership tour manager role?
So the end of 2019, it was kind of an unexpected scenario, but I got a call from Dierks' manager, Mary Hilliard Harrington, and she said, hey, we've there's been a parting of ways, and we think that we would like for you to be the tour manager. And I never really saw it from a stage manager to a TM is not kind of a traditional jump. You know what I mean? It would typically be like, oh, I'm been a production coordinator and I'm going to make this move into the tour manager role. And I was like, wow, that, it caught me very off guard, but I was very appreciative. I'd always had a really good relationship with her and with Dierks and, all of our team. And I was like, hey, this is a couple days before Christmas. And I was like, can I take a minute and think about this, and talk to my wife? Because there's some big things that the way you manage your time changes immensely between those two jobs. She was like, yeah, let's just kind of reconvene after Christmas around the first of the year. And you can let me know what you would like to do. And if you don't want it, that's totally fine. You can keep your role as the stage manager, and life goes on as normal.
Because you kind of are going from day of show heavy to pre-show heavy now.
Correct.
Yep.
And that was the managing that time, and the at-home time.
Yeah.
Goes from when you're stage manager, you don't have anything to do in your home. Like my days off were truly my days off.
Man.
To going to like now when I'm home, I go sit in my office for 4 to 10 hours a day, and I do advances and help with travel, and you know what I mean? Like try to make sure everything's right. So when we show up, it's right. And then all the people that are there to execute have the tools they need. So
different.
We were supposed to talk after the first of the year, and then 2 or 3 days later, she called me back and she's like, all right, word's kind of out that this is happening, and I'm getting this flood of resumes in or out. And I was like, well, I guess I'm in. You know? So it was kind of it definitely was a curveball, but one that in hindsight, I'm obviously very thankful for.
Yes. So. I want to get into, all of this experience of you in music and then on the road and in venues and working with people and kind of this whole community of touring and live events. What inspired you to co-found StageWater?
Oh man. Yeah. So, obviously we all suffered through COVID, and, we all learned. I kind of always knew that this was a gig-based industry, right?
Yeah.
Like we all kind of knew the extent that like a lot of people are on for a tour, off for a tour, but I don't think that it really dawned on me, and this was probably my naivety, how many of those people were 1099 contract workers that didn't have the support.
Yeah.
And that didn't have a company behind them that would be looking out for them. And, you know, we were super fortunate in that regard. Dierks extended himself graciously to keep his team together. And I know a lot of artists in town did, and I know a lot of artists didn't have the means to do that,
right.
you know, that were on their way up. So we all, you know, we lived through that. We come back, and it's early in us kind of coming back from COVID in 21, but two of the guys that I worked with, Zach Belcher, who's Dierks' videographer, and Jay Ballinger, who's now Charlie Crockett's TM currently, we were all sitting on the bus, and we were talking about what we had kind of all just lived through, and the idea that, like, anytime there's a natural disaster or something terrible happens in the world, there's typically the music industry pulls together and does a benefit concert. And, you know, we've all participated in them at Bridgestone and different places, and, like, there was really nobody looking out for the music industry when this happened. And like, I know there were tons of people affected at the time, the restaurant industries, and you know, it was not siloed to our industry, but there was no stopgap in place at all, you know? And then there's all these people that don't have work and like that. And, you know, Live Nation did a really good job of spinning up Crew Nation in the moment. And I was very impressed by that, and something that I hope they continue to do. But we're talking about like, how do we give back? How do we create a thing that gives back? And you know, we started talking about things that happen in perpetuity, and water is, you know, I mean, it's obviously the essence of life. And it's like, so the idea was people need this every day. And then if we create this product that people consume every day, and we're willing to give 15% of that gross profit back to different organizations, then we can help this industry that we work in, and hopefully we can do it forever, you know? And if this thing catches on and that people in our industry use it, they'll be giving back to the people that they're employing. And so that was kind of the genesis of the whole thing, was that idea that it's a thing that we all need every day.
Thing that we all need every day. And here's a way to give back.
Yeah.
Wow. So tell me about the product.
So it's really simple. I mean, right now it's a still canned water, all black can, black lid, says StageWater on it. Looks like it's kind of been spray painted on the side of a road case, and that's it. I mean, the idea was initially like just a black can, because when you do stuff, we all tear labels off stuff, right? And so it was like, well, if we have this can that's up there on stage, it'd be cool if like nobody really knew what it was, but that's kind of not smart marketing. For branding. Branding.
Building a brand.
So we came up with like, it's a very light kind of a brand look. But we want, you know, our hope is that people in venues and you know, theaters, festivals will start using this product, and, you know, we can start this give back. And we want to partner with, you know, I personally used backline.org during COVID to find a therapist that helped me a ton. And then, you know, my health insurance comes from Music Health Alliance here in Nashville.
There we go.
And then, you know, there's NEVA that keeps all of these venues, you know, kind of cohesive and supporting this independent venue network. So all of those are places that we would like to see our give back go to. And we also, you know, a year 3 goal is that maybe we can spin up our own foundation and do hardship grants like Crew Nation did. Every day I see somebody on socials that's like, you know, we have a coworker who has a child with an illness that we all kind of pitched in to help get a van for. And, you know, another co-founder, you know, somebody's spouse dies and they have kids and they can't tour anymore, or whatever the circumstance. It's like, it breaks my heart to see in those moments of need, the best we can do is a GoFundMe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, I love that we do that, and we don't need to stop doing that. But like, I also hate that like because the industry is the way that it is, that there's no structure around how to support those people. So
yeah, that's a beautiful mission, and it's beautiful because it's not only getting rid of some of that plastic and Dasani water that none of us want.
Yeah, that's the other benefit, I guess.
It's good water. It's canned. It's black, and it gives back. I mean, this is something that it's been needed for a long time, and this is really exciting.
I appreciate
Fully
it.
support.
Yeah, thank you.
And you're a crazy man for tour managing and entrepreneuring now.
It's the whole world of beverage has been a whole new experience for sure.
Yeah.
So
product.
I'm learning about sourcing cans and co-packing and all of those deals and
distributing. And, oh, how fun.
Yeah. So, but it's something new to learn, and it's exciting. And we're slated for a 2025 launch. We have our first product creation coming off the line in mid-November. So
congrats.
It's exciting.
Oh, I can't wait to support. I already am, but I can't wait to get my first can.
You are. I appreciate it.
Want to just kind of in our last little bit of time, want to get, you clearly have such a passion for this community and for road life and for event life. Mm-hmm. What are some of, maybe one of the largest lessons that you've learned through this, either the hard way or just through lived experiences?
I think that the thing that I try to remember every day is to communicate. Mm. And I know it sounds real simple, but that's I feel like that's kind of a lesson that you continually learn in different ways. So how to be inclusive, how to communicate with the team, how to communicate outside of your team and make your day better, and how that works as humans fundamentally, and you meet people that you don't communicate with well some days, and then you figure out how you find a path around and still have a successful day at the venue that you're at, or maybe there's some kind of internal rub with team members. And I think so much of what we do on tour is living with one another in such close quarters and working together every day so intimately. Like sometimes we get frustrated and we forget to communicate that in a healthy manner. So like my foundation is communication. And I think that's probably the most important lesson that I continue to learn every day is how to communicate, or that I strive to learn every day is how do I communicate and be a better communicator.
Do you feel like it felt like over communicating at first? Like, do you think that over communicating is the way to do it?
Yeah. And I mean, I do think over communicating is the way to do it. And being a Southern man, communication was not necessarily a thing that was well ingrained in me. So like initially when I decided, and I feel like I made a pointed decision at some point in my adult life, like I'm going to talk about all this all the time with, whether that's stuff with our family, parents, spouse, all of that stuff, and with our team, and include people in big decisions, knowing that ultimately I have to be responsible for those decisions, but still give them a voice in the room. You know what I mean? Like Dierks has a team of people that have been there for more than a decade. And like, I don't want to make a big decision without our lighting designers' input or our front of house audio leads input, because they know more about all of that stuff than I do. If I make a decision that they don't necessarily think's the best one, and I have good reason for that, I still have to own that decision. And we all have a good underlying respect for one another in that regard.
Well, I think it's in this industry to have that little turnover and to have that kind of loyalty means from the top. And then the others at the top that are really building that culture. Yeah. So hats off to you and your whole team.
And Dierks creates the culture. Those guys have been there well before me, and there's a bunch of them, and I have a lot of respect for him and for them. But communicating is important in that regard, because if you leave those people out too, it doesn't feel good to them. It doesn't, and they're such a knowledge base. Like there's no reason to not communicate,
Right.
So,
well, I want to just do a couple rapid fire real quick. First, what was your first concert?
First concert without a parent. I went to a bunch of concerts as a kid with them, but first concert without a parent was March 27th, 1995, the Grateful Dead at the Omni with Jerry Garcia still alive.
And that's why you have an exact date. I was wondering what? Okay,
Well,
that makes a lot of sense.
It turns out my wife's birthday is also March 27th.
There you go.
So I kind of remember those two things.
Special day.
It was a special day, though. My older sister took me, and, I'm 14. I skipped my middle school sports awards to go watch the Grateful Dead.
I think that was the right decision.
Yeah, it's pretty spectacular.
Wow, what a first. What's your favorite venue to work in and see a show?
So favorite venue to work, from a tour manager perspective, we all love Guilford. I've heard it come up on the show a ton. I also love Meriwether Post and the 930 Club. They do such a wonderful job. We just had a big pool party there this year with Dierks.
Oh, how fun.
From a production standpoint, I really love the amphitheater in Chula Vista, San Diego, because it's got a huge parking lot, 8 docks that are perfect truck level. The stage is enormous. The dock's covered, and the grid's great for rigging. So, it's one of those venues. When I was stage managing, I always had a good day there. So
I'm learning this. I can't wait to go to Guilford. I can't wait to go to these that everyone's talking about. What's one item that you can't tour without?
Probably sunglasses.
Okay. Yeah, because you're in amphitheaters.
I just don't. Yeah, I don't. I'm pretty all right with making do with what I got. But
Sharpies?
Sharpies also.
Yep.
But I hate getting up off the bus in the morning, and if I've left my sunglasses somewhere else, walking out into the world and being, it's a pet peeve of mine. So I'm going to go with sunglasses. A close second, followed by Sharpie.
Keep the world dark. Getting off that bus.
Yeah,
man.
Exactly.
And lastly, what is the best piece of advice that you've received in this industry?
I said it earlier, but all roads lead to here. So if you want to do something different, make a different decision. We all can affect change in our own lives. And I think through taking inventory of where we're at and where we want to go, it's owning that we're responsible for ourselves. Also showing up early all the time.
There we go.
15 minutes early is on time, and on time is late is the concise version of that. But
that's some good advice. And change. Nothing's going to change unless you change.
Make the decisions to get to where you want to go,
Chris, thank you. How can people follow you, find you, and find StageWater?
StageWater.com. There's a splash page up, and we're gathering emails, and we're going to start doing some outreach at the end of the year. And I think my Instagram is Chris_Thacker, which I haven't posted on in a really long time. So,
awesome.
Yeah, in Nashville, I'm around. So
thank you so much for being on here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.